Hey, it's Alex here. I've traveled across 40 countries in the past 3 years, but nothing prepared me for what I stumbled upon in the mountains of southern Albania. It started with a single sentence whispered to me by an old woman selling figs at a roadside stall. In our village, the women choose the husbands. I laughed politely. She didn't single quotes. She pointed behind her to the towering peaks beyond the road. Lubov E. Cricket. Go there. Tomorrow. So I did. I packed my camera, my notebook, and my curiosity. I had no real idea what I was walking into. Just a name and a direction. Lubov E. Cricket is a tiny village nestled in the folds of the mountains, where the stone houses lean into the hills like they're part of the landscape itself. It's the kind of place that doesn't exist on most maps. The kind of place where time forgot to move forward. As I climbed the winding path toward the village, the air changed. It felt thicker. Not heavy, more like sacred. As if I was walking through something ancient, untouched, unspoken at the entrance of the village. A woman in traditional Albanian dress was waiting for me. No words, just a nod. She handed me a folded piece of parchment and disappeared into the stone alleyways. It wasn't a welcome note. It was a set of rules. 1. You may not speak during the ritual. 2. You may not film unless permitted. 3. You must wear white. I unfolded it again and again. Who had written this? What was this ritual? And why me? By nightfall, I found myself sitting at the edge of a fire circle with 3 other foreigners, equally confused. A man from Brazil, a woman from Turkey, and a couple from France. None of us knew what to expect, but the villagers did. They moved around us like they were preparing for something far greater than a show. Then the drums started. Deep, earthy, pulsing. From the shadows emerged a procession of women. Some young, some older, but all in flowing embroidered robes that shimmered in the firelight. They walked in a spiral around us, eyes locked forward, chins high. I wanted to breathe, but I was frozen. It was like watching a storm gather in perfect silence. They didn't dance. They didn't speak. They chose, one by one. Each woman stepped forward and placed a woven ribbon around the neck of someone in the circle. When one wrapped it around my neck, she didn't even look at me. Her eyes were on the flames. I wanted to ask what it meant. But rule number 1 held me still. Asterisk, this wasn't a tourist attraction. It wasn't a reenactment. It was real. In part 2, I find out what the ribbon meant and why the women of Lubov E. Cricket have been choosing their own husbands for centuries. Under the moonlight, in silence, and on their own terms. Trust me. This story is just beginning. The next morning, I woke to the sound of cowbells echoing through the valley. The village looked entirely different by daylight, calm, almost ordinary. But I couldn't shake what had happened the night before. The ribbon was still around my neck, a woven red and silver cord, soft and warm. Like it belonged there. I stepped outside, and the woman who had given me the parchment was waiting again. This time she spoke. You must follow me. We walked in silence up a winding path until we reached a house with a wooden door carved with symbols. Inside was the woman who had chosen me, the one who placed the ribbon. She looked different. In the daylight, too, younger but more serious. Her name was Drita. She didn't smile. She studied me like I was both guest and test. You were chosen, she said plainly. You were marked. I asked, finally breaking the rule of silence, what it meant. In our tradition, she explained, we do not wait to be chosen. We choose. The ribbon is not marriage. It is intention, a bond of interest. It can mean many things. But once given, it must be acknowledged. I wasn't sure if I felt honored or owned. But Drita didn't treat it like romance. This wasn't about love at first sight or fate. It was about strength, independence. Ritual, she explained, that once a year. During the midsummer moon, women of age are invited to participate in the choosing ceremony. It is a rite that goes back centuries. No men organize it. All outsiders influence it. It is entirely by and for the women of the village. Some ribbons are symbolic. Some lead to friendships. Some, yes, even to marriage. But always, she said. It is her choice. Later, the other foreigners and I gathered again at the fire circle, this time in daylight. Each of them had a ribbon, too. The couple from France looked uneasy. The Brazilian man was smiling. The woman from Turkey had already arranged to stay an extra week. I asked Rita why outsiders were invited at all. Because some of our women want to see the world. And some of us believe the world needs to see them too. Suddenly, the ritual didn't feel strange anymore. It felt necessary. In part 3, I witnessed what happens when tradition meets resistance. Because not everyone in the village agrees with this ancient practice. And what comes next challenges everything I thought I understood about love, culture, and freedom. Later that evening, I met an older man named Rami in the village square. He was sitting alone near the water fountain, stringing tobacco into an old pipe. When I greeted him in Albanian, he responded in perfect English, a soft, tired voice that carried weight. "You're here for the ribbons," he said, without looking up. I nodded. He finally looked at me. It was not always like this. I sat down beside him, and over the next hour, he told me a side of the story I hadn't yet heard. A story of friction beneath the surface. Rami had grown up in Lubov cricket. He remembered a time when the ceremony was whispered about, not spoken, openly. When men still had the final say, even if women performed the ritual. It was more symbolic in those days, he said. But the women, they made it real. He sighed, tapping his pipe against the bench. Some of the older men feel the ceremony has changed too much, that it gives too much power to the women, that it invites too many outsiders. His eyes drifted across the square where young girls ran laughing, trailing silk scarves behind them like comet tails. But not all of us are afraid, he added quietly. Change is just truth walking forward. Later that night, the atmosphere in the village grew tense. A group of men stood near the fire pit, whispering to one another. Drita walked past them, shoulders high, eyes locked ahead. I caught up with her. "There's pressure," she said. "From families, from tradition, but we won't stop." She told me that some of the younger women had been threatened with disinheritance if they participated again next year. Some had even left the village entirely. "It's not just about choice," she said. "It's about voice." And that's when I realized this wasn't just a ritual. It was a quiet revolution. In part 4, I followed Drita into the heart of the mountains where the ceremony was first born. There, in the sacred ruins of an ancient temple, she tells me the real story. The origin no one dares speak aloud, and trust me, ... It changes everything. It was still dark when Drita knocked on my door. The sun hadn't risen, and the village lay wrapped in fog. She was dressed in white again, a thick shawl wrapped around her shoulders, and in her hand was a lantern. "Come," she said. No. Cameras? We walked uphill for almost an hour in silence. The only sound was our breath and the gravel crunching beneath our boots. As the sky began to blush with early light, I saw the shape of it. The ruins of an old stone temple, half swallowed by moss and time. Ivy curled around columns. The air smelled of wet earth and rosemary. "This is where it began," she whispered. She led me inside. There was no roof, just sky, and at the center, a stone basin ringed with carvings I couldn't decipher. Drita lit a candle and placed it beside the basin. Before any church, before any law. This is where the first women stood. I sat across from her as she told me the true story passed from grandmother to granddaughter. Centuries ago, this village was ruled by a patriarchal family that arranged marriages for women without consent. The young women of Labavi Cricket, desperate for control over their own fates, created a secret gathering. By night, in this very temple, they would choose their partners and mark them with woven cords, a symbol of will, not obedience. When they were discovered, the punishment was severe. Some were forced into exile, others were silenced forever. But the ritual survived, in secret, and over time it became more than resistance. It became identity. This, Drita said, is why we choose. Not for love, not for tradition, but because we refuse to be claimed. We do the claiming. I asked her if she believed it would last. If the ritual could withstand the modern world, the tourists, the criticism. She nodded slowly. We don't do this for the world. We do this for us, but we welcome those who listen. I looked around the crumbling temple, the sun now pouring through the open ceiling. It felt like I was sitting inside a memory that refused to die, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about gender, or marriage, or rebellion. It was about sacred choice. In part 5, I returned to the village for the final night of the festival, and something happens I never expected. One of the ribbons is placed not by a woman, but by a girl barely 12. And it changes everything I thought I knew. The village had changed since I first arrived, not in appearance, but in energy. Something had settled, something else had awakened. The fire circle was being prepared again. Women moved quietly with purpose. Men stood further back this time, respectful but cautious. I wore white, as instructed. The ribbon Drita had given me was tied to my wrist, now no longer around my neck. It was my choice to keep it there. Drita joined me beside the fire. Tonight is different, she said. Watch closely. The drum started that same deep, slow pulse that felt like it came from the mountain itself. Women emerged, robes shimmering, faces unreadable. Then something new. A small figure stepped into the ring. She couldn't have been more than 12. Long black braid down her back, white linen dress, bare feet. In her hands, a blue and gold ribbon. Gasps rippled through the circle. Drita leaned toward me. That's her first time. No one expected it. The girl walked, not hesitantly, but with slow precision across the firelight. She stopped in front of a local boy, maybe 14, who stood trembling, eyes wide. She raised the ribbon and tied it to her own wrist. A silence fell, then a hum. Not quite approval, not quite confusion, just something new. She reversed it. Someone whispered behind me. She didn't choose him, she chose herself. And that, somehow, felt like the most powerful act of all. After the ceremony, I sat on the same stone bench Rami had occupied. He joined me again. Well, he said, lighting his pipe, looks like the ritual still has things to teach us. We watched as the girl sat with older women, accepted among them already. It will survive, I said. Won't it, Mummy? Smiled. It will become what it needs to become. As I packed to leave the next morning, Drita gave me a new parchment. It wasn't rules this time. It was an invitation. Come back next year, she said. Bring someone who needs to remember their power. I boarded the bus out of Labuvi Cricket with the mountains behind me and the story still burning in my chest. In a world full of noise and claims and conquest, there is still a place where women choose, and sometimes the choice they make is themselves.